to tell you, the house is an absolute wreck. We are just about done packing to get everything out of here. But we also got our chart plotters came, our Axiom 9 chart plotters, and all the cabling that we need. That's about a tenth of the cabling. Seriously, you should see. I've already got a bunch in Scotland. The chart plotters themselves are nicely sized, I think. And then this is how they're going to go. I already kind of drew out on my drafting software the location of everything so that I can get it cut before we go abroad. So I'm going to do that later this afternoon. We also have a couple of AIS link man overboard beacons for our life vests. These are basically, they do AIS. They're made by ACR, but they do AIS, so you can see them if you have AIS on your boat. We've got a network switch, AIS splitter, the actual AIS unit, and I-70S instrument, and this is the hard controller for the Axiom. The older E70 product, E70S, has the hard controller built into it. The Axiom are just like a glass bridge type of deal. So they don't have them. It's, I think, a little bit of a bummer. You kind of have to add them on your own if you want as a separate part. They're not, the parts aren't expensive. The hard controller is only like $100, but still, it's just the nature of it. That's the new design. Yeah. Well, back in Troon, got Wendy's bimini installed. The wind's starting to come up a little bit in the afternoon. Here's my teak washboards that I refinished back in Denver, brought with, and it's going to be the beginning of a pretty major refit as far as electronics go. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I got here a couple of days ago, and you know, the boat is an absolute wreck. If Wendy was here, she'd kill me. But you know, boxes are arriving, stuff is showing up, and I'm learning the systems. It's a very systems intensive boat, and there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be learned and understood. One of the things that I focused on was trying to get tools here, and I've probably overdone it a bit as far as what I've brought. I've got buffers and I've got everything under the sun. In any event, I'm starting on the projects. As some of you know, by trade, by profession, I've been a project manager for most of my life. And so I've got a lot of simultaneous projects going on. I've managed to get a bunch of them done already. But I would normally recommend starting one project and finishing it. But I don't have that option. In fact, there's a reason to not do it that way. And that is that almost everything that I would need in terms of cabling and parts, I have to order. And so I'm basically gonna install the stereo, install all the electronics kind of simultaneously. And in the course of doing that, I'm gonna discover which parts I'm missing. I've already found out that this TV mount may or may not be the right product for what I'm trying to do. But those are the types of things that you need to know about. The one project I was largely successful on yesterday was getting LED lights replaced, or getting halogens replaced with LEDs. The amount of electricity that standard halogen bulbs use is considerable, and you really need to minimize power usage on a cruising boat. So there's a lot going on, obviously, in these instrument panel areas, and the first order of business is really to start, you know, labeling everything that we're taking apart, so we know where it all went. It may not get used in the future, but it is it's you know, at least we'll know. It'll be a lot easier. That it's probably all in all at least 10 power supplies coming in to this, and each one's on a different breaker. We want to make sure that we keep those. It'll just be a lot easier to put all this stuff back together if we know which, you know, if we don't have to go around testing every lead to try to figure out which one it is. So you know, the old RL70C plotter is definitely going away, but the C-Talk inputs from the old C-Talk system, the old Raymarine system, supposedly are going to plug right into the new version. So all the depth sounders, the logs, the wind instruments, all that stuff should just plug right in. That's what I've been told. We'll see. It remains to be seen whether it's as easy as they claim. You know, as a lot of people know, the U.S. standard for wiring a 110 volt AC system carries a lot more juice through it, and therefore it needs to be beefed up. The 230 volt systems that you see on the European boats, they can get away with smaller gauge wire. And you can even see it at the marina. Any European spec boat is going to have the power cable for the shore power is going to be about half the size of what an American 110 system is going to require. And so it's unfortunate, because if you were to try to convert a boat like this across to 110, you'd have to rewire the entire thing. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to take the 230 volt power and just convert it with little plugs to the converter plugs to the 110 system. After about half a day of work, this is what we've gotten down to. The Furuno radar has been removed. All the radios have been removed. All the power cords have been labeled, and the C-Talk network has been left intact. The existing one, we want to be able to just plug straight into the new system. So when you're working in a marina, luck counts for so much. And you know, here, West Coast Marine, Hugh, the owner, has kind of taken me under his wing and has just offered me all sorts of stuff. He lent me this Makita jigsaw. I've had one shipped over, but it's still in customs, and they're jerking my chain about getting it released. In the meantime, I brought a ton of tools with me. This is one of 5 bags of hand tools, but it's just so amazing to have somebody say, "Oh yeah, just go in my shop and use all my power tools, and here, have some marine grade veneer plywood. This is just scrap we had laying around. You can have it." And I'm here trying to make new instrument panels, and I'm chasing after starboard and different types of plastics, but it looks to me like this might just be the answer. And so I'm going to give this a shot and see. These original panels are made of aluminum, which is obviously hard to work with. I'm not so sure if they're truly original, but I think I can replicate this fairly well. I just need to do a little sawing and some drilling and some gluing and some other things, and I think I'll be in the game. Today I'm doing some of the more skilled labor of fitting these pieces of marine plywood in that Hugh has so graciously given me, and trying to decide exactly where my instruments are going to be. I just have to document all this so people can get an idea of what a boat electronics refit looks like. It doesn't sound like it's going to be much, but it truly is. And My biggest problem right now is is wiring, is getting cabling run from one area to another. And this is where our new Raymarine course computer and an evolution sensor are going to go. I believe this is the old flux gate right here. But one of the nice things about Hugh letting me use his shop and some of his materials was that I've been able to kind of make some parts that you know, can kind of cover up some of the damage, some of the pre-existing damage that's been done to this boat. And I think this is, in the end, this is all going to look pretty good. But for right now, it's distressing to say the least. You know, I have to say I find the mornings demoralizing. The boat is a wreck. It's cold. But the bottom line is there's no point in feeling sorry for yourself. You just have to get on the horse and ride it, you know. And so there's no shortage of things to do. And I think that the last couple of days I've noticed that although I'm demoralized in the morning, I get really kind of excited toward the middle of the day, and toward the end of the day things really start to feel pretty good. Success! I've got these wires all the way through. It's only taken 2 hours in order to get that done. By the way, as a hint, when you wrap these things with electrical tape, make sure that you fold over the end so that you can unwrap it easily. When you don't do that, finding where the end is to unwrap the tape is very, very difficult. So just a word on that. Whenever you're doing these projects, you really, I've said it in some of my other videos, but you want to use boat cable. Boat cable is pre-tinned. If you notice, the wire's kind of silver instead of gold, and it's also heavier gauge. It's heavier than SAE wire, and this is the standard of the boating industry these days. This boat doesn't have it. It's built with older stuff, and you can see it on the wires when they've been exposed. Boy, it's hard to see on the switch here. You can see how it's all green. That's from the copper that was in the switch, and this switch is no longer working. I'm hoping that with enough WD-40 and some time, it'll start back up again, because I don't have a spare, and I haven't been able to find a spare yet. So I'd really like this one to kind of miraculously come back to life. But nonetheless, that's the deal with electrical wiring. So I think that Talisman and myself are finally coming to an understanding about how this is going to work, that the captain is always right, and I will exert whatever amount of effort is necessary to get things to be the way I want them to be. And I think at the end of the day, that's the right answer. It has to be the only answer. So much of it's about being able to change gears and move to something else whenever there's an impediment, and never getting demoralized, just charging forward and getting it done, and having a deep toolbox. That's the other thing. Making sure that you've got, sometimes it's about being a dick, other times it's about kissing someone's ass. It might even be about bribery. It might just be physical effort and not giving up. But this is a lost art, I'm finding. The younger people have a tough time with the idea that you're just gonna work at something until it's done. And I'm still carrying a few extra pounds here, but I swear I'm losing weight. I'm only eating breakfast and dinner at this point, because I just don't have time to stop for lunch. I just don't. And anyway, we'll see how this goes, but I'm going to get this job done.
There's no option not to. So here's a small improvement I made. These washboards have been vibrating back and forth during the night, and so I put Velcro along in here on both sides, and now they fit pretty snugly. And I think they're maybe a bit tight. I've got to push it down to get it on, but I think that with time they'll loosen up.
This is bad. I woke up this morning with what feels like a low-grade fever, and probably just from overwork and too much stress. And I just really feel down and crappy, and I just don't have time. I don't have time to be sick. I have to just keep going. And it just sucks. I wish I had like another week. If I had another week, everything would be fine. Boat goes in the water on Tuesday. Got it scheduled for a lift on Tuesday, and today's Saturday, and I've just got so much that has to be done. I'm so glad I don't do this for a living. If I was an electronics installer as my main job, I would shoot myself. It's just constant problems. Everything that you do doesn't work, and you just keep having to hammer your head against the wall. And I don't believe that it's anything that would get better with experience. I think every problem that you encounter is a one-off problem. You might, if you just did oysters all the time, you might be able to speed things up some. But yeah, I just, like I said, feeling crappy.
After a little bit of work in Hugh's shop, I was able to get the nav pod base on and get this fish down through and into the engine room. I don't know. I really honestly don't know where I'm going to take the cords from here. I've labeled the thrusters, and I'm gonna have to do something to make sure those don't go away.
Yeah. So today's Sunday, and in theory, the boat's supposed to be going in the water on Tuesday. That might slip, but we'll have to see how much I can get done. As you can see, I'm kind of fishing wires right now. If I can get these wires into this binnacle, I think I'll be okay. You never want to count your chickens or anything, but this is the toughest and tightest of the runs, and there's just a ton of cabling that needs to go in here.
So I got up this morning early and hit it pretty hard, and this is kind of where we're at now. I'm very, very happy with the amount of progress that I've made. Here's the autopilot, the new Raymarine autopilot, a 400 series autopilot, which is their kind of top of the line version. And luckily, everything is laid out exactly the way the old one is. Congratulations to Raymarine for organizing it in a way that you can swap out one unit for another without having to totally redesign or relay out your wiring. As a project manager over the years, a lot of my job has been to try to fix other people's problems. Try to make something look presentable where the client isn't going to see it. And I'll give you kind of a hint about one of the tricks I've done over the years that works pretty well. So they had this kind of dumb looking box that they mounted to put binoculars in, and they put it there. Not only did they put it there, they also put it here, and in both cases it interfered with opening the doors. And it turns out that opening the doors is kind of important. We still don't know what this is. But what I've done is I've taken some black screws and I've just screwed them into the holes. And what this does is it makes it look like there's something mounted on the other side and that it belongs there. the secret of design a lot of times is that people see what they expect to see. And if you can give them something that looks reasonably like what they should see, their eye will just go right past it. Now, it won't go past it for someone like me. I am the king of seeing where somebody screwed something up, and I'm not lying about that. It's a curse as much as anything else. Everywhere I look, I see where people have tried to patch things and cover up things that were done wrong. And sometimes they're done well, and when that happens, I give them credit. But when they're done poorly, it doesn't look good at all. I've actually considered calling Oyster up and getting an Oyster plaque to put in here to cover these holes. But I'm thinking that the better answer is just to leave it like that, where it's not an eyesore. It's not something that someone's gonna say, "Oh, what happened there?" The same thing happened over here. Like the people went and cut this hole through a finished panel and then stuck something on top of it, which stenciled it over the years. And this is from Oyster, this kind of cutout, which was done back in the day, probably with some sort of template. It's obviously not done with CNC technology because it would be better if that were the case. And as I, what I've done here is try to make a panel to fit over top of it. I'm going to cover that with vinyl, and then it'll look like it's a factory finished product, and that's what I'm aiming for. Is try to bring this boat up to what would be considered a factory finish. I'm not going to be fully successful. I recognize that, because this boat's had like 4 owners and they weren't great craftsmen, and so but I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get this boat looking like something that any Oyster owner would be proud to own. It's hard. The front end of buying a boat is so expensive. I mean, it's like buying a new home. You buy new furniture and TVs and electronics and rugs and whatever else the house needs, and whatever the wife wants the house to be. And so, when you're buying a boat, you got to budget that stuff in. You've got to make sure that that's going to be okay, because there's no getting around it.
I'm up here at Hugh's shop, and the other day I came in here and just cleaned it all up as best I could. I didn't want to move anything, but there was just sawdust all over the floor, and plain filings all over the place. And I think those guys really were happy that I did that. Throwing down a layer of protective tape so that the jigsaw doesn't scuff this vinyl. So Wendy sent over this sheet vinyl for me, and the it got a little scuffed in the travels, but I think that I can find areas that I can get all the panels out of. All right, so what I'm going to show you guys here is how to do a professional splice on a backbone cable. This particular Raymarine backbone cable, it has 5 wires in it. It's got the silver ground wire and 4 other wires that are obviously going to need to be soldered and connected to this. There was no way this plug was going through the very tight holes that we encountered on this boat. Cutting and splicing these cables is not ideal, but it's necessary sometimes. It's a shielded cable, and the shielding takes kind of gets destroyed at the solder joint. What I've done here is I've put a piece of large shrink tube on. This is going to cover the entire assembly, and then these little tubes here are also pieces of shrink tube. It's a lot easier to get them over the end of the wire before you've stripped the end of it. That way you don't get a whole bunch of strands kind of caught in there. And
this, you know, we're going to put dielectric grease over top of the solder joint when we're done, and then we're going to slide these over and shrink them into place. And then we're going to take this tube over the entire thing and shrink that into place. And that way we'll have a truly waterproof connection. You know, we're at the nav station. We're not going to, you know, we're not really in a crazy marine environment, but nonetheless, these are the types of things that it really pays to do it right. So let's start right now. I'm going to do this a little at a time. I really can't video with my headlamp on. Okay, these have gone together well. The solder flows to the hot area, so it goes. You know, if you're adding heat to an area, then that's where the solder ends up heading to. So it flows toward the heat source. Okay, so here we have all these guys kind of bundled together, and I think, you know, we're pretty much good to go. The stereo is working. Again, all the wiring is kind of dangling down, but that's no problem. Working back here with the EV1 sensor and getting the autopilot control installed. So Wendy's arrived yesterday. She's trying to decide if the wine from last month has turned to vinegar or not. It's
medicinal.
Let's see.
It's medicinal wine.
A little vinegar never hurt anybody.
It's more drinkable than the vodka and the pineapple juice.
A rare sunny day in Scotland. Everybody's having a good time, even the dogs.
I'm still wearing a fleece.
Hi, Kitty.
Not cutie. Tired.
Tired.
Tired. Not cutie.
Well, the instruments are up. And everything appears to be working. Let's see here. We've got our AIS and splitters in. Here, these are amplifiers, just small amplifiers for the various zones. We got our little Victron inverter in place and running, and mostly we did a lot of organization underneath. We tried to, you know, organize all of the stowage that we have, all the spare parts and things like that. I guess the big work today was getting this TV installed and functioning. It's all wired. That kind of finished up all the wiring in the aft part of the boat. Everything is here. The autopilot's up and running. Autopilot lives back there, and underneath the bed, the quadrant and the RAM and everything, and the EV1 sensor is down there. By the way, this is one of the quilts Wendy made. The girl is multi-talented, to be sure. One of the lessons I've learned over the years is that when it comes to tight spaces, you really want to use these big zip ties, and the reason is because you can reach in and grab the ends. The little tiny ones, although they look like they'd work better, are impossible to manage and handle. So I'm trying to put this compass back in here, but clearly you've got the chain for the wheel and a bunch of other wiring that needs to be, everything in here needs to be tied up properly so that it can't move around and somehow get itself free. The main systems are the big thing. We have our VHF radio working. It still doesn't seem to be seeing a GPS signal, which is a problem because it's a DSC radio. So we want to make sure that that does eventually happen. It's a much more simple layout for our nav station. Just really not that much involved. Today I did some small things. I moved the Marine backbone power to the accessory circuit so that the backbone is going to be powered pretty much all the time, and that way the stereo can function without the chart plotters being on. Chart plotters have moved to their own circuit completely off of everything else. Radios are working. This DSC radio is in good shape, so we're good. We're good on that. Our AIS system, I checked with the AIS Pro program from Raymarine yesterday, and it's up and running, as is the splitter, stereo, amps, the inverter. Pretty much everything in here is working as it's supposed to. Our televisions are up and running. There's really nothing much left to do except the radar. The radar was supposed to be for today, but it's a kind of a rainy, nasty day, and not really in the mood to fly the mast with rain. But tomorrow's forecast is for better weather. So today's the day, getting the radar up. I've got all the tools I think I'll need. My drill is up on the deck on a lanyard, so hopefully it doesn't go anywhere. Wendy's doing her best to protect the windows from any type of falling objects, but in all honesty, if anything drops, it's going to be disastrous. So we're going to work on trying to avoid that. Okay, here it comes. Yeah, I think so. In that case, I'm declaring success on all my electronic projects. The radar is up and running. It paired beautifully, no problems. It took us about 5 minutes to get the thing set up and going.